Shalom WJC families. It is time for our weekly Torah Talk. This Saturday in synagogue, we will be reading Parshat Vayikra, the first Parsha, the first Torah portion in the book by the same name, Vayikra, or Leviticus in English. It's the Levitical book, and it talks a lot about the temple, or the tabernacle in this case, what will be the rules that will govern the temple eventually in Jerusalem, the Beit HaMikdash. And we read a lot of the laws of sacrifices, as well as, in this parsha, the kinds of sacrifices there are, how they are to be made, what purposes they serve. And today I want to focus in on one particular kind of sacrifice, and that is the mincha sacrifice, which was a meal offering, a grain offering that was served. It made sort of different kinds of breads that they would cook and give over to God and to the priests. And that mincha offering is now the basis of our mincha service, the afternoon prayer service known as mincha. So a very interesting feature of the mincha sacrifice is that it had to be done with salt. We read in chapter 2, verse 13, V'chol korban minchatcha, whatever kind of mincha offering you make, b'melach timloch, with salt it must be salted. And don't ever, for the rest of our history, don't ever make this offering without salting it. It's very, very important. So the question is, why does this sacrifice require salt? It seems like an odd requirement. Cooking with salt makes sense, I guess, but a korban, a sacrifice made to be closer to God, why would that require salt? And the commentaries, there's all kinds of commentaries on this idea. Rashi, who's always sort of our basic commentary, says that this actually refers back to a midrash from Midrash Rabbah that says that when on the second day God created Shamayim and Mayim, right? God created the heavens and the waters and separated them, that the Mayim, the waters, were jealous. They said, oh, Shamayim gets to stay close to you, right? We are going to sink down into the earth. There's going to be earth on top of us, and we're going to be so far separated from the holiness from God. Now, let's forget the cosmology of this. That assumes God is high up and not low down. But this is the midrash. And God says, don't worry, waters, because you're going to be salty, and I'm going to require that all the sacrifices that are made to me are salted. So when in the future the Jewish people want to connect with me through korban, be close to me, again, korban comes from the word karov, to be close, to be in relationship, I will make sure that they require to use some salt, some of what you will give off, right, when you evaporate, and you will be part of this ritual, bringing not only the water, or the lowest part of the water, close to me, but also as part of the raising up and the partnership with the Jewish people. And this seems to satisfy the water. That's Rashi's explanation. But I want to go a little deeper than that. The Ramban has a different kind of explanation. I think it might be helpful to us to understand this rule and what it actually says about the relationship between God and the Jewish people. So the Ramban draws out one of the nature, what he believes to be the nature of salt, which is, remember, salt back then came from, think of the Dead Sea, right? Evaporation pools, and the mineral salt would be left over after it evaporated. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, points out, he says, salt contains two elements. One element is the element of water, right? Because it comes from the water. But the other, says Ramban, is the element of fire, because what brings out the salt is, in fact, the evaporation process. The heat of the sun is what brings out the salt. So in the salt are these two diametrically opposed elements, right? Fire and water. And, says Ramban, when we put that on the korban, on the altar, it is a reminder to us of this sort of dual nature of what we're doing, of being in relationship with God. Relationships are nurturing And, as water can be nurturing, but also dangerous, as water can be drowning. And they are warming, like fire can be warming, but they can be dangerous. And you can be burnt by fire. And so too, in our relationship with God, there should be that complexity. And the salt represents that complexity. To put it in another way, as does Rabbeinu Bachya, as well as I think Chizkuni, two more additional commentators, they say, look, it's simple. You put some salt on meat and it can be delicious. But if you put too much salt on the meat, it will ruin it. And so too in our relationship with God, right? The whole idea of the Korban is to put us in relationship with God, to bring us close to God. We shouldn't think of this as some simple thing, right? Relationships are complicated. Every relationship requires risk. On the one hand, we want to throw some salt on the relationship. We want to have some spice in the relationship. We need to put ourselves out there and make ourselves vulnerable in order to grow in that relationship. On the other hand, we don't want to dump a whole bucket full of salt, right? That's going to ruin the meal offering or ruin the sacrifice. It's going to dry it out. Rabbeinu Bachya talks a lot about the whole process of salting meat to draw out the blood. For those of you familiar with how we make meat kosher, that's part of how we do salting and soaking it. If you use too much, you'll destroy the food, or on the other hand, you might say destroy the relationship. Every relationship requires balance, and it's a very powerful message, I think, both for our relationship with God. We want to be close, but not too close. We want to be vulnerable, but not too vulnerable. We want it to be honest and open, but maybe not too honest and open. And so too in our relationship with people. They require spice. They require salt. Nobody wants to be in a boring relationship where we pretend like we know everything about each other and we never grow deeper in our connection. But we also have to be careful not to throw too much salt on the relationship, not to make it ruinous. Just like in our relationship with God, which should be complex and beautiful, so too in our relationship with others, we need to take those risks, allow ourselves to be vulnerable, allow ourselves to be honest, but also take great care not to go too far, not to be too vulnerable too fast, or too honest to the point where we're hurtful. Salt is this beautiful symbol of fire and water, of making things taste better, but also possibly making things be ruined. And so too, we should pursue that balance of relationship. Our relationships should continue to be deep and satisfying and growing and challenging and tasty and beautiful, but also we should treat them with respect and balance and understand that because they are so valuable, just like our relationship with God, all of our relationships, we should take this kind of care. May we all have this kind of success, spicing up our relationships, but only in healthy ways, that we grow to know those we love and respect more deeply, and that those relationships become more satisfying to us all. And may we get that same satisfaction from our connection with God.